The blood on Nadine Winters' hands had long since dried, but she could still see it every time she closed her eyes, could still hear the screams that had torn through the night 3 months ago when the raiders came to her family's homestead outside Fort Worth, Texas, in the spring of 1878. She stood at the edge of Desdemona, Texas now, a small cattle town that smelled of dust and livestock and hope, her worn carpetbag clutched in one hand and her father's old revolver hidden beneath her dusty traveling coat. The scars on her arms throbbed beneath the long sleeves she wore despite the April heat, raised pink lines that crisscrossed her forearms where she had fought against the ropes that bound her, where she had crawled through broken glass to reach her dying mother. The scar on her left shoulder, hidden deeper still, came from the knife of a man whose face she tried every day to forget. Nadine was 22 years old, and she had survived something that should have killed her. But survival felt less like victory and more like a sentence she had to serve alone. Her parents were dead. Her younger brother Samuel had been away working a cattle drive and did not even know yet what had happened. The homestead was ashes. Everything she had known was gone, and so she had taken what little money her mother had hidden in a tin can beneath the floorboards and bought passage on a stage heading west, looking for a place where no one knew her story, where no one would ask about the scars she kept hidden beneath fabric and shame. The main street of Desdemona stretched before her, lined with false-fronted buildings that promised civilization in the middle of the raw Texas prairie. A general store, a saloon, a hotel with peeling paint, a livery stable from which came the sound of hammer on anvil. Nadine picked up her bag and walked toward the hotel, keeping her head down, her dark hair tucked beneath a simple bonnet. She had learned to make herself small, to take up as little space as possible, to avoid the eyes of men who might look too long or ask too many questions. The hotel clerk was an older woman with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked Nadine up and down with the practiced assessment of someone who had seen plenty of drifters and runaways pass through her establishment. "I need a room," Nadine said quietly. "Just for a few nights until I can find work." "Work doing what?" the woman asked, not unkindly. "Anything honest. I can cook, clean, mend clothing. I can read and write and do figures." The woman's expression softened slightly. "My name is Martha Henley. I own this hotel. I could use someone to help with the laundry and the rooms. Pay is not much, but it includes board and a small room in the back." "You running from something, girl?" Nadine met her eyes steadily. "I am running toward something new. The past does not matter anymore." Martha studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right then, I won't pry. But I run a respectable establishment and I expect hard work and honesty from anyone under my roof." "You will have both," Nadine promised. She spent the rest of that day learning the routines of the hotel, stripping beds and washing linens in the big copper tub out back, scrubbing floors and beating rugs, and trying to lose herself in the simple rhythm of physical labor. Her arms ached where the scars pulled tight across healing skin, but she welcomed the pain because it was clean and honest, not like the pain that woke her screaming in the night. That evening, as the sun began to set and paint the Texas sky in shades of orange and gold, Nadine carried fresh linens to one of the upstairs rooms. Through the window she could see the street below, and her attention was caught by a man leading a tall black horse toward the livery stable. He moved with the easy confidence of someone completely at home in his own body, lean and broad-shouldered, his dark hair curling slightly beneath a dusty Stetson. Even from a distance, there was something about him that made her pause, something in the gentleness with which he spoke to his horse, the way he ran his hand along the animal's neck. She pulled back from the window quickly, annoyed at herself for staring. She had no business noticing men, handsome or otherwise. That part of her life, the part that might have included courtship and marriage and children, had died on the floor of her family's homestead. The scars she carried made sure of that. The next morning, Nadine was hanging laundry in the yard behind the hotel when she heard raised voices from the street. She set down the wet sheet she had been pinning to the line and moved cautiously toward the corner of the building, staying in the shadows. A group of men had gathered outside the saloon, and in their center stood the man she had seen the previous evening with the black horse. In the daylight, she could see his face more clearly, could see the strong line of his jaw and the startling blue of his eyes, could see the way he held himself with quiet authority even though he was outnumbered. "I am telling you for the last time, Carson," he was saying, his voice level but hard as iron. "Those cattle you are trying to sell have Circle K brands that have been altered. That is rustling, and rustling is a hanging offense." The man he addressed, a thick-set brute with a face like a slab of raw meat, laughed harshly. "You got no proof, Xander Kane. Those are my cattle bought and paid for. Then you will not mind if the sheriff takes a closer look at those brands," Xander replied. "The sheriff is 3 days away in the county seat, and by the time he gets here, those cattle will be long sold and I will be long gone." Carson stepped closer, his hand dropping to the gun at his hip. "You should mind your own business, Kane. You are just a ranch hand. You have got no authority here." "I am the foreman of the Double K Ranch," Xander said quietly. "And those cattle you are trying to sell were stolen from my herd 2 weeks ago. That gives me all the authority I need." The tension in the air crackled like lightning before a storm. Nadine found herself holding her breath, her hand unconsciously moving to where her father's revolver was hidden in the pocket of her apron. She did not know this man, Xander Kane, did not know why she suddenly cared whether he walked away from this confrontation alive, but something in her chest had gone tight with fear for him. Then Martha was beside her, her hand firm on Nadine's arm. "Come away from there, girl. This is not our fight." "But they are going to kill him," Nadine whispered. "Xander Kane can take care of himself. He is the best man with a horse or a gun in 3 counties, and he has got more sense than to start a fight he cannot finish." Even as Martha spoke, the sheriff's deputy appeared from the direction of the general store, an older man with a star pinned to his vest and a rifle in his hands. "I heard everything, Carson. You and your boys are going to come with me, and we are going to take a very close look at those cattle. Anyone who has a problem with that can discuss it with Judge Wilson when he makes his circuit next month." Carson's face went purple with rage, but he could not draw on a man with a rifle already aimed at his chest. He spat in the dust at Xander's feet and then gestured to his companions. "This is not over, Kane." "Yes, it is," Xander said simply. "One way or another, it is over." Nadine watched as the deputy marched Carson and his men away, watched as Xander settled his hat back on his head and turned toward the livery stable. For just a moment, his eyes swept across the buildings of the main street and seemed to catch on the spot where she stood half hidden in the shadows. Even from a distance, even for just that brief instant, the intensity of his gaze made something flutter in her chest. Then he was moving on, and she was left wondering if he had even seen her at all. She threw herself into her work for the rest of the day, trying to scrub away the strange feeling that had taken root somewhere behind her ribs. She did not need complications. She did not need to notice any man, let alone one who clearly courted danger with the same ease that he gentled horses. She needed to keep her head down, to earn her keep, to build some kind of life from the ashes of the old one. But that night, when she lay in her narrow bed in the small room off the hotel kitchen, she dreamed not of raiders and fire and blood, but of blue eyes and a voice like iron wrapped in velvet. The next few days passed in a blur of routine. Nadine woke before dawn to start the fires and heat water for the guests who wanted baths. She served breakfast in the small dining room, keeping her eyes down and her responses polite but brief. She cleaned rooms and washed linens and mended torn curtains, and slowly she began to feel almost safe in the predictability of it all. On the fourth day, she was in the general store buying soap and bluing for the laundry when she heard his voice behind her. "Excuse me, miss. I believe you dropped this." She turned and found herself looking up into the face of Xander Kane. Up close, he was even more striking than he had been from a distance, with sun-weathered skin and laugh lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled often, despite the hardness she had seen in him during the confrontation with Carson. He was holding out a handkerchief, plain white cotton with her initials embroidered in one corner, the last piece of needlework her mother had completed before she died. "Oh," Nadine breathed, reaching for it quickly. "Thank you. I did not realize I had lost it." Her sleeve pulled back as she reached, exposing just the edge of the scars on her wrist. She saw his eyes flick down to them and then quickly away, saw something that might have been understanding cross his face. She yanked her sleeve back down, her cheeks burning with shame. "No trouble at all," he said gently. He tipped his hat to her. "I am Xander Kane. I do not believe we have been properly introduced." "Nadine Winters," she said, clutching the handkerchief against her chest. "I work at the hotel. I thought I had seen you there. You just arrived in town recently." "A few days ago." She could not quite meet his eyes, could not stand the kindness she saw there. Kindness was dangerous. Kindness made you remember that you were human, that you had once been someone who laughed and dreamed and believed in the possibility of happiness. "Where are you from, if you do not mind my asking?" "Fort Worth area," she said, keeping her voice carefully neutral. "I needed a change." He nodded slowly, and she had the unsettling sense that he could see right through her careful words to the truth beneath. "Desdemona is a good town. Hard-working people for the most part. You should be safe here." The way he said that last part made her look up sharply. "Safe from what?" "From whatever you are running from," he said quietly. "We have all got ghosts, Miss Winters. I am not judging you for yours." She opened her mouth to deny it, to insist that she was not running from anything, but the lie died on her tongue. There was something in his eyes, some shadow of old pain, that told her he would know it for what it was. Instead, she just nodded once, a tiny acknowledgement. "I should get back to my work," she said. "Of course. It was a pleasure to meet you properly, Miss Winters." He tipped his hat again and moved past her to the counter where the store owner was wrapping his purchases. Nadine fled before he could say anything else, before she could do something foolish like ask him about the ghosts he carried or tell him that she had noticed him too. But over the following weeks, she could not seem to avoid him. Desdemona was a small town, and Xander Kane seemed to be everywhere. She saw him in the street speaking with the deputy, saw him loading supplies onto a wagon outside the general store, saw him one Sunday morning outside the small whitewashed church, clean-shaven and wearing a suit that made him look like a prosperous rancher instead of a working cowboy. Each time their paths crossed, he tipped his hat to her with that same quiet courtesy, and each time she felt that same unsettling flutter in her chest. Martha noticed, of course. One evening, as they were preparing supper together in the hotel kitchen, the older woman gave Nadine a shrewd look. "Xander Kane is a good man," she said without preamble. Nadine nearly dropped the potato she was peeling. "I am sure he is. His family owns the Double K Ranch about 10 miles north of town. His father died 2 years ago, left the whole operation to Xander and his younger sister. He works harder than any 3 men I know, and he treats his ranch hands fair. He does not drink to excess, does not gamble, does not keep company with the saloon girls. There are at least half a dozen respectable young ladies in this town who would marry him tomorrow if he asked. "Why are you telling me this?" Nadine asked, keeping her eyes on the potato. "Because I see the way he looks at you, and I see the way you try very hard not to look at him." Martha set down her knife and turned to face Nadine fully. "I do not know what happened to you before you came here, and I am not asking you to tell me. But I do know that whatever it was left marks on you, inside and out. I can see you are carrying something heavy, child. Maybe it is time to set it down." Tears stung Nadine's eyes. "It is not that simple." "It never is. But hiding from life is not the same thing as living it." Nadine wanted to argue, wanted to explain that she was not hiding, that she was protecting herself, protecting others from the brokenness inside her. But the words would not come, so she just went back to peeling potatoes and tried to pretend her hands were not shaking. 2 days later, a violent thunderstorm rolled across the prairie. Nadine was hanging the last of the laundry, racing to get it inside before the rain started when the sky opened up. Within seconds she was drenched, her dress plastered to her body, her hair streaming water. She grabbed the basket of half-dry linens and ran for the back door of the hotel. But her foot caught on the uneven ground and she went down hard, the basket flying from her hands. Pain exploded through her shoulder, the bad one with the deep scar that never quite stopped aching. She lay in the mud for a moment, gasping, as the rain pounded down and turned the world into a gray curtain. Then there were hands on her, strong and careful, lifting her to her feet. "I have got you," Xander's voice said in her ear. "Can you walk?" She nodded, too stunned and hurting to protest, and let him half carry her to the shelter of the hotel's back porch. He set her down gently on the bench there, and then went back into the rain to retrieve the scattered laundry. By the time he returned with the basket, she had caught her breath enough to feel embarrassed. "Thank you," she managed. "You did not have to do that." "You are hurt," he said, crouching down in front of her. "Let me see your shoulder." "It is fine." "Miss Winters, you are white as a sheet and you are favoring that side pretty heavily. Let me see." "No." The word came out sharper than she intended. "It is fine. It is an old injury. It just aches sometimes." He studied her face for a long moment, water dripping from the brim of his hat. "All right, but at least let me help you inside where it is dry." Before she could argue, Martha appeared in the doorway. "Good Lord, what happened?" "Nadine, you are soaked through." "Xander Kane, what are you doing here? Right place at the right time, I suppose," Xander said. "She took a fall." "I think she hurt her shoulder." Between them, they got Nadine inside and into a chair by the kitchen stove. Martha shooed Xander out, promising him coffee and pie later as thanks for his help, and then proceeded to strip Nadine out of her wet clothes with brisk efficiency. Nadine tried to protest, tried to keep the older woman from seeing the scars that covered her arms and shoulder, but Martha was having none of it. When the wet dress came off, Martha went very still. Nadine closed her eyes, unable to bear whatever expression was on the other woman's face. The scars were ugly, she knew. Raised and pink and twisted, they told a story of violence and terror that no amount of time would ever fully erase. "Oh, honey," Martha said softly. "Oh, you poor child." "Do not," Nadine whispered. "Please do not pity me. I cannot bear it. This is not pity. This is sorrow for what was done to you." Martha's hands were gentle as she wrapped a blanket around Nadine's shoulders. "Was it Indians? Raiders? Raiders. They came in the night. My parents are dead. I survived." She said it flatly, without emotion, because emotion would break her open, and she was not sure she could be put back together again. Martha said nothing for a moment, just pulled another chair close and sat down, taking Nadine's scarred hands in her own. "And you have been hiding these scars ever since, trying to pretend they are not there, trying to pretend you are not hurt. What else can I do? No one wants to see them. No one wants to hear the story. I am ruined, Martha. No decent man would ever want me now, not like this. So I cover them up and I keep my head down and I try to forget. You are not ruined, Nadine Winters. You are scarred, yes, you are hurt. But you are here, you are alive, and that takes more strength than most people will ever know." Martha squeezed her hands. "And as for no man wanting you, I think you might be surprised." Before Nadine could ask what she meant, there was a soft knock at the kitchen door. Martha rose to answer it and returned with Xander Kane, who was carrying a small leather case. "I took the liberty of fetching the doctor's kit from my saddle," he said, not quite looking at Nadine. "That shoulder should be checked properly. I have some experience with injuries, if you will allow me to take a look." "No," Nadine said immediately, clutching the blanket tighter around herself. "No, thank you. I am fine. Miss Winters, please. I can see you are in pain. Let me help." "You cannot help. No one can help. It is done, it is over, and I just have to live with it." He set the case down on the table and moved to crouch in front of her again, the same way he had on the porch. This time, he was close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his blue eyes, could see the absolute sincerity there. "You do have to live with it," he said quietly, "but you do not have to live with it alone. And you do not have to let an injury go untended because you are afraid of what I might see. Whatever happened to you, whatever scars you carry, they do not make you less. They do not make you something to be hidden away. You do not understand," she whispered. "Then help me understand." She looked at Martha, who nodded encouragingly. She looked back at Xander, at this man who had shown her nothing but kindness, who had tracked mud through Martha's clean kitchen just to make sure she was all right. Something in her chest cracked, just a little, just enough to let in a sliver of light. "The blanket stays on except where you need to see the shoulder," she said finally. "Of course." With Martha's help, they arranged the blanket so that only Nadine's injured shoulder was exposed. She stared at the opposite wall, her jaw clenched, as Xander's careful fingers probed the joint. His touch was gentle, clinical, but she still flinched when he pressed on a particularly sore spot. "You dislocated this at some point," he said. "It healed, but not quite right. You also have some deep scar tissue that is pulling when you move. How did it happen?" Nadine said nothing. The memory was too close, too sharp. The smell of smoke, the sound of her mother screaming, the feeling of cold steel parting her skin. "You do not have to tell me," Xander said, as if he sensed her distress. "I am sorry for asking. The shoulder will heal, but you should be careful with it. No heavy lifting for a while. I can make a liniment that will help with the pain." He withdrew his hands and stepped back, allowing Martha to rearrange the blanket. Nadine finally looked at him and found him watching her with an expression she could not quite read. Not pity exactly. Not horror or disgust at the scars he must have glimpsed. Something else. Something that looked almost like recognition. "Thank you," she said softly, "for helping me." "Any time," he replied. Then he hesitated, as if debating whether to say more. "Miss Winters, may I ask you something?" She nodded warily. "You think those scars make you weak?" The question caught her off guard. Yes. They are proof that I was not strong enough to protect my family. They are proof that I broke." "May I show you something?" Before she could answer, he began rolling up his right sleeve. Beneath it, his forearm was covered in old scars, thin white lines that crisscrossed the tanned skin. He pushed the sleeve higher, revealing more scars on his upper arm, these ones thicker, more jagged. "These are from a mountain lion that attacked me when I was 19, he said. "I was checking fence line alone, which was stupid, and I did not see her until it was almost too late. She was protecting cubs. I managed to get my rifle up and fire, but not before she had torn my arm open in 3 places. I nearly bled to death before my sister found me. He rolled down that sleeve and began working on the other one. This arm bore different scars, burn marks, and a long puckered line that ran from wrist to elbow. These are from a barn fire when I was 21. One of the hands had fallen asleep smoking and set the whole place ablaze. I went in to get the horses out. Got most of them, but a burning beam came down and trapped me. The burn scars are from the beam. This long one is from where I had to cut my way through a tangle of fallen tack to get free. He let that sleeve fall too and then unbuttoned the top of his shirt, pulling it aside to show his collarbone. A round, puckered scar sat just above it. And this is from a bullet, courtesy of a cattle thief 2 years ago. He got off 1 shot before I got off mine. He died. I did not. I spent 3 weeks in bed with fever, and my sister swears I died twice before the fever broke. He buttoned his shirt again and met her eyes. I am not telling you this to compare pain, or to say that what happened to you is not important. I am telling you because I want you to understand something. Every single one of these scars marks a time when I could have died and did not. They mark a time when I faced something terrible and survived it. They are proof of my strength, not my weakness. And so are yours. Nadine stared at him, tears sliding down her cheeks before she could stop them. No one had ever said anything like that to her. No one had ever suggested that surviving was something to be proud of rather than something to be ashamed of. I tried to fight them, she whispered. The raiders. I had my father's gun, but I could not get to it in time. They tied me up, made me watch while they killed my parents. I fought so hard against the ropes that I tore my wrists bloody. When they cut me loose and left me for dead, I crawled through broken glass to get to my mother, even though I knew she was already gone. I fought, but it was not enough. You fought, Xander said firmly, and you survived. That is always enough, Miss Winters, always. He reached out slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, and then his fingers were touching the scars on her wrist, the ones that had been hidden beneath her sleeve. His touch was feather light, reverent almost, tracing the raised lines. These make you stronger, he said softly, not weaker. Every day you get up and keep going, despite the pain and the memories, that is strength. Every day you choose to live instead of give up, that is courage. Do not let anyone, including yourself, tell you otherwise. Something broke open in Nadine's chest, something that had been locked tight and frozen since the night her world burned down. She found herself leaning forward, found herself letting Xander pull her into his arms, found herself sobbing against his chest while he held her and murmured quiet reassurances, and let her break apart in a way she had not been able to since it happened. Martha discreetly left the kitchen, and Nadine cried until she had no more tears left. When she finally pulled back, shaky and exhausted, Xander's shirt was soaked through, but his eyes were kind. I am sorry, she managed. I did not mean to fall apart like that. Do not apologize. I think you needed that. He stood and retrieved his hat from where he had set it on the table. I should go, but Miss Winters, I want you to know that if you ever need anything at all, you can come to me. The Double K is not far and you are always welcome there. Why? She asked. Why would you help me? You do not even know me. He was quiet for a moment, turning his hat in his hands. Because I know what it is like to carry scars that other people do not understand. Because I know what it is like to think you are broken beyond repair. And because from the first moment I saw you, standing in the shadows watching me face down Carson, something in you called to something in me. I cannot explain it better than that. I just know that I want to help you if you will let me. He settled his hat on his head and headed for the door. Just before he left, he turned back. And for what it is worth, Miss Winters, I think you are one of the bravest people I have ever met. Anyone who can survive what you survived and still be standing deserves nothing but respect." Then he was gone, leaving Nadine sitting in the kitchen with her heart hammering and her mind racing and the lingering warmth of his touch on her scarred wrists. Over the next several weeks, Xander Kane became a regular presence at the hotel. He found reasons to stop by almost daily, sometimes bringing supplies that Martha had ordered, sometimes just stopping in for a cup of coffee and a slice of whatever pie she had made. He was always polite, always respectful, never pushing Nadine to talk more than she was comfortable with. But he was there, steady and solid and somehow safe. Slowly, cautiously, Nadine began to trust him. She began to look forward to his visits, to the sound of his deep voice and the sight of his easy smile. She began to tell him things, small pieces of her life before the raid, stories about her parents and her brother, memories that had seemed too painful to speak aloud. He listened to all of it with complete attention, never judging, never pitying, just being present. And he told her things too. About his childhood on the ranch, about his father's death and the weight of responsibility that had fallen on his shoulders, about his sister Xenia, who was 18 and headstrong, and wanted to run the ranch herself, despite half the county thinking a woman had no business doing such things. About the loneliness of being responsible for so many people and so many acres, of having no one to share the burden with. One afternoon in early June, Xander arrived with a proposal. "The ranch is having a barn dance next Saturday," he said, as Nadine was beating rugs in the yard behind the hotel. "To celebrate the end of calving season, I was hoping you might agree to come." Nadine paused mid-swing, the rug beater heavy in her hands. "I do not dance." "You do not have to dance. You could just come and enjoy the food and the music. My sister would love to meet you. I have told her about you." "What have you told her?" "That I have met someone remarkable, someone brave and strong who survived something terrible and did not let it destroy her." He stepped closer, his expression earnest. "Please, Nadine, let me show you that there can still be joy in the world. Let me show you the ranch, introduce you to my family and my friends. Let me give you one evening where you do not have to hide." She wanted to say no. The thought of being surrounded by strangers, of being in a situation where people might ask questions or stare at her scars, made her chest tight with anxiety. But the hope in Xander's eyes, the genuine desire to share something important with her, made her hesitate. "I do not have anything appropriate to wear to a dance," she said finally, his face broke into a wide smile. "Is that a yes?" "It is a maybe. If I can find something suitable, then yes." "Martha can help with that," he said confidently. "She is a miracle worker with a needle. Thank you, Nadine. You will not regret this, I promise." True to Xander's word, Martha threw herself into the project of preparing Nadine for the barn dance with enthusiasm. She pulled out a dress that had belonged to her daughter, who had moved east to St. Louis years ago and no longer needed her old clothes. It was a simple calico in a pretty blue that brought out the color in Nadine's eyes, with long sleeves that would cover her scars and a modest neckline. "You will be the prettiest girl there," Martha declared as she pinned the hem to the right length. "I am not trying to be pretty," Nadine protested. "I am just trying not to embarrass Xander." "Oh, honey." Martha sat back on her heels and looked up at Nadine with knowing eyes. "You could never embarrass that man. He is head over heels for you, even if neither of you has said it out loud yet." Nadine's cheeks burned. "We are friends. He is just being kind." "Xander Kane is kind to everyone, but he does not visit everyone every single day. He does not look at everyone the way he looks at you, like you hung the moon and stars. And he certainly does not invite just anyone to meet his sister and see his ranch." Even if he did have feelings for me, which I am not saying he does, it would not matter. I am not ready for that. I might never be ready for that. Martha stood and dusted off her skirts. No one is saying you have to be ready today. But maybe, just maybe, you could let yourself consider the possibility that someday you might be. That man would wait a lifetime for you if he thought you were worth it. And from where I am standing, you absolutely are. When Saturday arrived, Nadine was a bundle of nerves. She dressed carefully in the altered blue calico, making sure every button was fastened, every sleeve properly covering the scars on her arms. Martha helped her with her hair, pinning it up in a style that was prettier than the severe bun Nadine usually wore. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked almost normal, almost whole. Xander arrived in a wagon just as the sun was beginning to set, bathing the prairie in golden light. He had cleaned up too, wearing a crisp white shirt and a black vest, his hair still damp from a recent washing. When he saw Nadine, his eyes went wide. "You look beautiful," he said, and the sincerity in his voice made her blush. "You do not have to say that. I am not saying it because I have to. I am saying it because it is true." He offered his hand to help her up into the wagon seat. "Ready? No," she admitted, "but I am going anyway." He laughed, a warm, rich sound that made something flutter in her chest. That is the spirit. The ride to the Double K took about 30 minutes, following a well-worn road through rolling grassland dotted with cattle. Xander pointed out landmarks as they went, telling her stories about the land and the animals and the men who worked for him. Nadine found herself relaxing despite her anxiety, lulled by the rhythm of his voice and the gentle sway of the wagon. The ranch itself was impressive, a sprawling collection of buildings centered around a large house with a wide porch. The barn where the dance was being held was enormous, its doors thrown open to reveal lanterns hung from every beam and a fiddler already tuning his instrument. People were gathering in clusters, talking and laughing, and the air smelled of roasted meat and fresh bread. "This is wonderful," Nadine breathed. "Wait until you try my sister's apple pie," Xander said with a grin. "She will deny it because she thinks cooking is beneath her, but she makes the best pie in 3 counties. He helped her down from the wagon and kept her hand tucked into the crook of his elbow as he led her toward the barn. People called out greetings as they passed, and Xander introduced her simply as my friend Nadine from town. No one stared, no one asked invasive questions. They just smiled and welcomed her and then went back to their conversations. Xander Kane turned out to be a whirlwind of energy, a tall girl with dark hair like her brother and the same startling blue eyes. She descended on them immediately, pulling Nadine away from Xander with a laugh. "Finally, I get to meet the mysterious woman who has my brother visiting town every single day," she said. "I was starting to think he had made you up." "It is nice to meet you," Nadine said, trying to keep up as Xenia dragged her toward a table laden with food. "Xander said you work at the hotel in town. Do you like it? Are you planning to stay in Desdemona? Please say yes, because if you leave, my brother will be absolutely insufferable." "Xenia," Xander said, appearing at Nadine's other side, "let the woman breathe." "I am just being friendly," Xenia protested, but she winked at Nadine in a way that suggested conspiracy. "Fine, I will stop interrogating you, but only if you promise to sit with me during dinner. I want to hear all about what Xander is like when he is in town trying to impress you." "I am not trying to impress anyone," Xander said, but his ears had gone slightly red. The evening passed in a blur of music and food and conversation. Nadine found herself genuinely enjoying it, drawn out of her shell by Xenia's easy warmth and the kindness of the ranch hands who made a point of including her in their stories. She learned that Xander was respected as much for his fairness as his skill, that he had a reputation for taking in men who needed a second chance and giving them honest work. As the sun set completely and the lanterns cast dancing shadows across the barn, the fiddler began a slow waltz. Couples moved onto the makeshift dance floor and Xander appeared at Nadine's side. "I know you said you do not dance," he said, "but would you make an exception? Just one dance. I promise I will not let you fall." She wanted to refuse. She had not danced since before the raid, and the thought of being that close to him, of having his hands on her, made her heart race with something that was not quite fear, but was not quite excitement either. But he was looking at her with such hope, and she found she did not want to disappoint him. "Just one," she agreed. He led her onto the floor and took her right hand in his, placing his other hand carefully on her waist. The position was proper, respectable, but still more physical contact than Nadine had experienced since the night everything fell apart. For a moment she tensed, her breath catching. "Look at me," Xander said softly. "Just focus on me. Nothing else exists right now except you and me and this music. Can you do that?" She met his eyes and found them steady, anchoring. Slowly, she nodded. He began to move, leading her through the steps with practiced ease. Nadine stumbled at first out of practice and nervous, but he was patient, adjusting his pace to match hers. Gradually, she found the rhythm, let herself lean into his guidance. The barn and the other dancers faded into a blur, and there was just Xander, solid and warm and safe. "Thank you for coming tonight," he said as they turned slowly across the floor. "It means a lot to me that you are here. Thank you for inviting me. You were right. I needed this. I needed to remember that life can be good. It can be better than good, Nadine, if you let it." She knew what he was asking without him having to say it directly. He was asking if she could see a future that included him, if she could imagine letting someone close enough to matter, if she could trust him with the broken pieces of herself. The answer should have been no. It was too soon, she was too damaged. There were too many reasons why this could never work. But as they danced beneath the lanterns, as his hand held hers and his eyes promised safety and understanding, Nadine felt something she had not felt in months. She felt hope. The song ended too soon. Xander released her with obvious reluctance, and they stood there in the middle of the dance floor, neither quite ready to step apart. Then Xenia was there, tugging on Nadine's arm. "Come with me," she said. "I want to show you something." Xander gave Nadine an apologetic look but nodded, and Nadine let herself be pulled through the barn and out into the cool night air. Xenia led her away from the noise and the light, toward a corral where several horses dozed in the darkness. "My brother is in love with you," Xenia said without preamble. Nadine's breath caught. "What? He is? I have known him my whole life, and I have never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. But he is going to be careful and respectful and take his time, because that is the kind of man he is. So I am telling you now, before this goes any further, that if you are not serious about him, if you are just passing through or looking for a distraction, you need to tell him. Because if you break his heart, I will make your life very difficult." There was no real heat in the threat, but Nadine heard the underlying seriousness. "I am not trying to hurt him. I am not trying to do anything. I am just trying to survive." Xenia's expression softened. "I know. Xander told me a little bit about what happened to you. Not the details, just that you survived something terrible. And I am not trying to push you into something you are not ready for. I just need you to understand that Xander is not playing games. If he is pursuing you, it is because he wants a future with you. A real future. Marriage and children and growing old together. Can you see yourself wanting that, could she?" A week ago, Nadine would have said no without hesitation. But now, Having seen Xander with his family and his friends, having danced in his arms and felt safe for the first time in months, she was not so sure. Maybe it was too soon. Maybe she was too broken. But maybe, just maybe, there was enough left of her to build something new. "I do not know," she said honestly. "I want to, but I am scared." Scared of what? Scared that I am too damaged. That the scars I carry, inside and out, make me unfit to be anyone's wife. That if I let him get close, he will see how broken I really am and realize I am not worth the effort. Xenia was quiet for a moment, leaning on the corral fence and looking out at the dark shapes of the horses. "Can I tell you something? When our father died, Xander was devastated. They had not been getting along before the accident. Papa thought Xander was too soft, too willing to give second chances to men who did not deserve them. They had a terrible fight the morning Papa died, said awful things to each other. And then Papa went out to break a wild horse and the horse threw him and broke his neck, and Xander never got to apologize or make things right." She turned to face Nadine, and in the dim light from the distant barn, her eyes shimmered with tears. He carried that guilt for months. Blamed himself, thought he was cursed, thought he did not deserve to be happy because he had let his father down. It was eating him alive. And then one day, one of the older ranch hands sat him down and told him that carrying guilt and pain was not the same thing as honoring the dead. That the best way to honor Papa was to live fully, to love deeply, to not waste the life he still had. "What does this have to do with me?" Nadine asked. "Because you are carrying the same kind of guilt. You survived something that killed your parents, and some part of you thinks that makes you unworthy of happiness. But Nadine, the best way to honor your parents is to live. Really live, not just exist. And if you can find love with my brother, if you can build a life here, that would be a beautiful way to honor their memory. They would want you to be happy. I am certain of it." Tears spilled down Nadine's cheeks. "What if I cannot be what he needs? What if I am too broken to be a good wife?" "Then you work on healing together. That is what love is, Nadine. It is not finding someone perfect. It is finding someone whose broken pieces fit with yours." Xenia reached out and squeezed her hand. "Give him a chance. Give yourself a chance. You might be surprised by what you can build together." They walked back to the barn together, and Nadine felt something shift inside her, some small seed of possibility taking root. Maybe Xenia was right. Maybe it was time to stop just surviving and start actually living. The rest of the evening passed too quickly. Nadine found herself laughing at the ranch hand stories, found herself relaxing into the warmth and community of the gathering. And always, Xander was nearby, watching her with those blue eyes that saw too much and somehow managed not to look away. When it was time to leave, he helped her back into the wagon and they started the ride back to town. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light across the prairie, and the air was cool and sweet with the scent of grass. They rode in comfortable silence for a while before Xander spoke. "Did you have a good time?" "I did. Better than I expected, if I am honest. Your sister is wonderful. A little terrifying, but wonderful," he laughed. "She has been running this ranch with me since Papa died. She is tougher than half the men I employ and smarter than all of them put together. I do not know what I would do without her. She said something to me tonight," Nadine said carefully, "about you being in love with me." Xander's hands tightened on the reins. "Did she now? Is it true?" He was quiet for so long that Nadine thought he might not answer. Then he pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to face her, his expression serious in the moonlight. "Yes," he said simply. "It is true. I have been falling in love with you since the day I picked up your handkerchief and saw the way you looked at me, like you were not sure if I was dangerous or safe. I know it is too soon. I know you are still healing from what happened to you. I know I should probably keep my mouth shut and give you more time, but I am not good at pretending, Nadine. So yes, I am in love with you, and I will wait as long as it takes for you to decide if you could ever feel the same way about me." Nadine's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he must be able to hear it. "I am scared," she whispered. "I know. I have scars, not just the ones you can see. I have nightmares almost every night. I wake up screaming sometimes. I flinch at loud noises, and I cannot stand to have anyone behind me where I cannot see them. I do not know if I will ever be normal again. I do not need you to be normal. I just need you to be you." He reached out slowly and took her hand, being careful not to grip too tight. "I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow, Nadine. I'm not even asking you to say you love me back. I'm just asking you to let me keep courting you, to let me show you that you can trust me, that you can be safe with me. Can you do that?" She looked down at their joined hands, his large and calloused from hard work, hers small and scarred. They should not fit together, these two broken people with their painful pasts and uncertain futures. But somehow they did. "Yes," she said, "I can do that." His smile was bright enough to light up the darkness. "Thank you." He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles, and Nadine felt something warm bloom in her chest. Maybe Xenia was right. Maybe she could build something beautiful from the ashes of her old life. Maybe she deserved happiness after all. Over the following months, Xander courted Nadine with patience and determination. He continued his daily visits to the hotel, but now they had a different quality, a deeper intimacy. He brought her small gifts, wildflowers picked on the prairie and smooth stones from the creek that ran through his property. He took her on rides in his wagon, showing her the boundaries of the Double K and introducing her to the men who worked for him. He told her stories about his childhood and his dreams for the future. And slowly, carefully, Nadine began to share her own stories in return. She told him about her father, who had been a quiet man but fiercely protective of his family. She told him about her mother, who had sung while she worked and taught Nadine to read from the family Bible. She told him about her brother Samuel, who should have been home the night of the raid but had been away on a cattle drive, who had never answered the letter she sent telling him what happened. "Maybe he never got the letter," Xander suggested gently. "Cattle drives can last months and mail is not always reliable. Or maybe he did get it and he is trying to track you down. Have you checked with the post office in Desdemona to see if anything has come for you?" She had not, too wrapped up in her own grief and guilt to think of it. The next day, Xander accompanied her to the small post office, and the postmaster produced a letter that had been sitting in general delivery for weeks. It was from Samuel, forwarded from Fort Worth, the handwriting shaky with emotion. Nadine stood outside the post office and read it with tears streaming down her face, while Xander stood beside her, a solid presence. Samuel was alive and working on a ranch in the New Mexico territory. He had gotten her letter and had immediately tried to come back, but by the time he reached Fort Worth, she was already gone. He had been searching for her ever since. He was sorry, so sorry that he had not been there, that he had left her to face everything alone. He wanted to see her to make sure she was all right, to be her family again. "I have to write back," Nadine said, clutching the letter. "I have to tell him where I am." "We can do that right now," Xander said. "The general store sells writing paper, and Nadine, you should tell him to come here. To Desdemona. You should see your brother. What if he blames me for what happened? What if he thinks I should have done more to save them? Then he is a fool, but I do not think he will. That letter sounds like a man who is just grateful you are alive." She wrote back that very afternoon, her hand shaking as she formed the words. She told Samuel about Desdemona, about her job at the hotel, and carefully, tentatively, about Xander. She asked him to come visit if he could, said she needed to see him, needed to know he was real and not just another ghost haunting her memories. While they waited for a response, summer settled over Desdemona in waves of heat and dust. The work at the hotel continued, but now Nadine had something to look forward to at the end of each day. The knock on the kitchen door that meant Xander had finished his work and come to see her. Some evenings they just sat on the back porch and talked. Other times he took her out to the ranch where Xenia was always happy to see her, and the ranch hands had started treating her like she was already part of the family. One particularly hot evening in late July, Xander suggested they go down to the creek that ran through the Double K property. "It is too hot to do anything else, and the water will be cool," he said. "We can wade and cool off before I take you back to town." Nadine hesitated. The creek meant exposing her arms and legs, meant letting Xander see the scars she usually kept hidden beneath long sleeves and skirts. But the heat was oppressive, and the thought of cool water was too tempting to resist. "All right," she agreed, "but you cannot stare." "I would never," he promised. The creek was beautiful, shaded by cottonwood trees and lined with smooth stones. Xander tied the horses in the shade, and then turned his back politely while Nadine removed her shoes and stockings and rolled up her sleeves. She stepped into the water, gasping at the cold, and felt some of the tension leave her body. Xander joined her, his own sleeves rolled up to expose the scars he had shown her months ago. They waited in silence for a while, the water swirling around their ankles before Xander spoke. "Can I ask you something?" "You can ask. I might not answer. That is fair." He was quiet for a moment, clearly choosing his words carefully. "Do you still have nightmares?" "Yes, not every night anymore, but still often enough." "Why?" "Because I was wondering if you had thought about what happens when we get married, where you would sleep, how we would handle the nightmares." Nadine's breath caught. "When we get married, not if." He turned to face her, water dripping from his hands. "Nadine Winters, I have been courting you for 3 months now. I have made my intentions clear from the beginning. I love you and I want to marry you. The only question is when you will be ready to say yes." Her heart was pounding again, that familiar flutter of fear mixed with something that might have been joy. "I am still scared," she admitted. "I know, and I am not asking you to say yes today. I am just asking you to think about it. To consider that you might be ready sooner than you think. What if I am never ready? What if the nightmares never stop? What if I cannot be a proper wife to you?" He moved closer, the water rippling around them. "Then we figure it out together. Nadine, I do not need you to be perfect. I just need you to be willing to try. If you have nightmares, I will hold you until they pass. If you need space, I will give it to you. If you need to talk or cry or just sit in silence, I will be there. That is what marriage is supposed to be. Two people facing life together, supporting each other through the hard times and celebrating the good ones. You make it sound so simple. It is not simple, but it is worth it." He reached out and took her hand, his thumb tracing the scars on her wrist with infinite gentleness. "These do not scare me, Nadine. Your past does not scare me. The only thing that scares me is the thought of losing you because you are too afraid to let me love you." She looked up at him, at this good, patient man who had somehow seen past her scars to the person she used to be, to the person she could still become. "I need more time," she said, "but I think the answer is going to be yes. I just need to be sure." "Take all the time you need," he said. "I am not going anywhere." In late August, Samuel Winters arrived in Desdemona on a dusty stage, thin and weathered and looking 10 years older than his 20 years. Nadine saw him through the hotel window and ran out into the street without thinking, throwing herself into his arms and sobbing. He held her just as tightly, both of them clinging to each other like they were the only solid things in a shifting world. I thought I had lost you, Samuel said, his voice rough with emotion. When I got your first letter and read what happened, I thought I had lost everyone. I am here, Nadine said. I am alive. We are both alive. They spent the next 3 days together, talking through everything that had happened. Samuel told her about the cattle drive, about the guilt that ate at him for not being there. Nadine told him about the raid in more detail than she had told anyone except Xander, told him about the long weeks of recovery and the journey to Desdemona. And she told him about Xander. He wants to marry me, she said, as they sat together on the hotel porch one evening. And I think I want to say yes, but I need to know that you are all right with it. You are my family, Samuel. Your opinion matters. Does he treat you well? Samuel asked. Better than I ever thought I deserved. Does he know what happened to you? Does he know about the scars? He knows everything. He says they make me stronger, not weaker. Samuel was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the street. Then I think you should marry him. Mama and Papa would want you to be happy, Nadine. They would want you to have a life, a family of your own. And if this Xander Kane is half the man you say he is, then he is lucky to have you. Xander met Samuel the next day, and the two men took each other's measure with the wary respect of two people who both loved Nadine and wanted what was best for her. They talked for over an hour while Nadine waited anxiously in the hotel, and when they finally came back, both were smiling. Your brother gave me permission to ask for your hand, Xander said. Though he also said if I ever hurt you, he will track me down and shoot me, which seems fair. I said it and I meant it, Samuel agreed. So I will ask now, officially. Xander took Nadine's hand and dropped to one knee right there in the hotel parlor in front of Samuel and Martha and two surprised guests who had been passing through. Nadine Winters, I love you with everything I am. I promise to protect you, to support you, to stand by you through whatever comes. I promise to be patient with your healing and to never make you feel ashamed of your scars. I promise to give you a home and a family and a future worth looking forward to. Will you marry me? Nadine looked down at him, this man who had taken her broken pieces and treated them like treasure, who had shown her that survival could become something more than just enduring. The fear was still there, would probably always be there in some form. But it was smaller now, manageable, no longer the defining fact of her existence. Yes, she said. Yes, I will marry you. He swept her up in his arms and kissed her right there in front of everyone, and Nadine kissed him back, feeling for the first time like she was truly, finally home. They were married 6 weeks later in the small church in Desdemona, with Martha and Xenia standing up with Nadine and Samuel standing up with Xander. It was a simple ceremony, but the church was full of people who had come to accept Nadine as one of their own, people who had seen her work hard and slowly open up, and who wished her nothing but happiness. Nadine wore a new dress that Xenia had helped her make, cream-colored calico with long sleeves and lace at the collar. When Xander saw her walking down the aisle on Samuel's arm, his eyes filled with tears, and she knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice. The first night as husband and wife was gentle and careful, Xander taking his time to help her feel safe and cherished. When he slowly pushed up her sleeves to reveal the scars on her arms, he kissed each one reverently, murmuring again that they made her beautiful, made her strong. When she woke gasping from a nightmare in the middle of the night, he was there immediately, holding her and whispering reassurances until she could breathe again. I am sorry, she said, shaking. I thought they might stop once we were married. I thought I might be better. You are better, he said firmly. But healing is not a straight line, Nadine. You are going to have bad nights sometimes. That is all right. I am here. I will always be here. Life on the Double K was different from anything Nadine had known before. There was hard work, to be sure, running a household and helping Xenia manage the accounts and the supplies for the ranch hands. But there was also joy. There were evenings sitting on the porch watching the sun set over the prairie. There were Sunday dinners with Samuel, who had taken a job on a neighboring ranch and visited regularly. There were quiet moments in the morning when she would wake up next to Xander and marvel that this was her life now, that she was allowed to be happy. The nightmares did not stop completely, but they became less frequent. The scars on her arms and shoulder faded slowly from angry pink to pale white. And bit by bit, Nadine began to think of herself not as a survivor of something terrible, but simply as Nadine Kane, wife and eventually, hopefully, mother. In the spring of 1880, almost 2 years after she had first arrived in Desdemona, Nadine told Xander she was pregnant. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy, and then immediately set her down and started fussing, convinced she needed to rest and should not be doing any heavy work. "I am pregnant, not an invalid," she protested, but she could not help but smile at his concern. Their son was born in December of that year during a cold snap that froze the water troughs and made the ranch hands grumble about having to break ice. Xander paced outside the bedroom for hours while the midwife worked, and when he finally heard the baby's first cry, he burst through the door despite Martha's protests. "Is she all right? Is the baby all right?" he demanded. "They are both perfect," the midwife said, handing him a tiny bundle wrapped in soft blankets. "You have a son." Xander looked down at the baby, at the tiny red face and the wisps of dark hair, and promptly started crying. He carried the baby to the bed where Nadine lay exhausted but smiling and placed the child carefully in her arms. "He is perfect," Xander said. "You are perfect. Thank you, Nadine. Thank you for giving me this." They named him Nathaniel, after Nadine's father, and he was a healthy, happy baby who rarely cried and seemed content to be passed around among the ranch hands who had adopted him as their unofficial nephew. Nadine discovered that she loved being a mother, loved the simple routines of feeding and rocking and watching Nathaniel discover the world. And she loved watching Xander as a father, the way he was gentle and patient, the way he sang off-key lullabies late at night when the baby was fussy. Samuel met a girl at a church social in 1881 and married her that fall. He and his bride settled on a small piece of land adjacent to the Double K, and suddenly, Nadine had family all around her, a whole network of people who cared about her and her growing family. In 1883, Nadine gave birth to a daughter they named Nora, after Nadine's mother. She had her father's blue eyes and her mother's dark hair, and she came into the world screaming with a temper that made the midwife laugh and declare she would be a force to be reckoned with. 3-year-old Nathaniel was fascinated by his baby sister, constantly wanting to help feed her and change her and rock her cradle. Life was not perfect. Nadine still had nightmares occasionally, still flinched at unexpected noises, still carried scars that would never fully fade. But she had learned to live with them, to accept them as part of her story rather than something to be ashamed of. And when she looked around at her family, at Xander and Nathaniel and baby Nora, at Samuel and his wife expecting their first child, at Martha, who still ran the hotel in town but visited regularly, she knew with certainty that she had built something beautiful from the ashes of her old life. One evening in the summer of 1885, when Nathaniel was 4 and Nora was 2 and Nadine had just told Xander she was pregnant again, they sat together on the porch watching the sunset. Xander had his arm around her shoulders, and she was leaned against his side, comfortable and content in a way she had never imagined she could be. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Marrying someone as damaged as me? Having to deal with the nightmares and the scars and all the baggage I brought with me?" He turned to look at her, his blue eyes serious. "Not for one single second. Nadine, you are the strongest person I know. You survived something that would have broken most people, and you did not just survive, you thrived. You built a life and a family and a home. Those scars you carry are proof of your strength, not your weakness. I told you that the first time we talked about them, and I have never meant anything more in my life. I love you," she said, the words coming easily now, no longer weighted with fear and doubt. "I love you too. Always." Their third child, another son they named Xavier after Xander, was born in early 1886. The birth was easier than the previous two, and Xander joked that they were getting the hang of this parenting thing. Nathaniel and Nora were thrilled to have a baby brother, and the house was full of noise and laughter and the organized chaos that came with 3 children under the age of 6. In the years that followed, the Double K prospered. Xander and Nadine expanded the ranch, bought more cattle, hired more hands. Xenia married one of the ranch foremen in 1887 and moved to her own house on the property, close enough to visit but far enough for independence. Samuel and his wife had 3 children who became constant playmates for Nadine's brood. By 1890, when Nadine was 34 and Xander was 35, they had been married for 12 years. Their eldest, Nathaniel, was 10 years old and already showing signs of becoming a rancher like his father. Nora was 8 and fierce, and determined to learn everything Nathaniel learned. Xavier was 4 and fearless, constantly getting into trouble and keeping Nadine on her toes. One afternoon in late spring, Nadine was hanging laundry in the yard, the same task she had been doing the day she met Xander all those years ago. Nathaniel was helping her, handing her clothespins, and Nora was chasing Xavier around the yard, their laughter ringing out across the prairie. Xander came around the corner of the house and stopped, just watching them, a smile spreading across his face. Nadine looked up and caught him staring. "What are you grinning about?" she asked. "Just thinking about how lucky I am," he said, moving to stand beside her. "How lucky we all are." She set down the wet sheet and turned to face him, this man who had saved her without even realizing she needed saving, who had loved her past her fear and her scars and her broken places. "I am the lucky one," she said. "You gave me a reason to live again." "We gave each other a reason," he corrected. He pulled her close, right there in the yard with their children playing around them and the laundry half hung and the Texas sun beating down. "I love you, Nadine Kane. Every scar, every nightmare, every beautiful imperfect piece of you." "I love you too," she said. "More than I ever thought I was capable of loving anyone." He kissed her, and in that moment Nadine felt the last tiny piece of the old fear and shame finally break free and blow away on the prairie wind. She was not the frightened, scarred girl who had stumbled into Desdemona 12 years ago. She was Nadine Kane, wife and mother and rancher, strong and whole and loved beyond measure. That evening, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Nadine and Xander sat on the porch as they had so many times before. The stars were brilliant overhead, countless points of light scattered across the velvet darkness. "You ever think about that first day we met?" Nadine asked. "When you picked up my handkerchief in the general store, all the time. I think about how you looked, like a wounded deer ready to bolt at any sudden movement. I think about how I wanted to help you but had no idea how. I think about how lucky I was that you decided to give me a chance. You told me that day that we all have ghosts. Do you still believe that?" "Yes. But I also believe we do not have to let them haunt us forever. Look at us, Nadine. Look at what we built. We took our pain and our scars and our ghosts, and we built a family, a life, a future. That is what matters." She thought about her parents, about the homestead that had burned, about the raiders who had stolen so much from her. The pain of losing them would never completely go away. But it had transformed into something different over the years, something softer. Not forgetting, but accepting. Not bitterness, but gratitude for the time she had with them and the lessons they had taught her. "I wish they could have met you," she said quietly. "My parents. I wish they could have known that I ended up happy, that I survived and built a good life. I think they would have liked you. I wish I could have known them, but I think they would be proud of you, Nadine. Proud of the strength it took to keep going, proud of the life you built. I am proud of you every single day." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, holding hands, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new work, new joys and frustrations. But tonight, in this moment, everything was perfect. Inside the house, baby Xavier started crying, probably having kicked off his blanket again. Nadine started to rise, but Xander stopped her with a gentle hand. "I will get him," he said. "You have been on your feet all day. Rest." He disappeared inside, and Nadine heard his low voice soothing the baby, heard Xavier's cries gradually settling into contented babbling. A few minutes later, Xander returned with Xavier in his arms, the toddler now wide awake and wanting to see the stars. "He wanted Papa," Xander said with a grin. "I think he is going to be a night owl like his mother." They sat together, the three of them, with Xavier pointing at the stars and making up names for them while Nadine and Xander laughed. And Nadine thought that this, right here, was everything she had never dared to dream of during those dark days after the raid. Not just survival, but joy. Not just existence, but a life full of love and laughter and purpose. The scars on her arms and shoulder were still there, would always be there. But they no longer defined her. They were simply part of her story, proof that she had survived something terrible and come out the other side stronger and more whole than she ever thought possible. Just as Xander had told her that day by the creek, the scars made her stronger. And the life she had built, the family she had created, the love she had found, these things made her whole. As the night deepened and Xavier finally fell asleep against his father's chest, Nadine looked out at the dark prairie that had once seemed so hostile and now felt like home. She thought about the girl she had been, scared and scarred and alone. And she thought about the woman she had become, brave and loved and surrounded by family. It had been a long journey from that awful night in Fort Worth to this peaceful evening on the Double K Ranch. But every step had been worth it. Every moment of fear overcome, every nightmare survived, every scar accepted, they had all led her here to this moment, to this life, to this love. "Thank you," she said softly to Xander. "For what?" "For seeing past the scars, for loving me when I could not love myself, for giving me a reason to believe in the future again." He shifted Xavier to one arm and used the other to pull Nadine close. "You gave me the same things, Nadine. We saved each other. That is what love does." And there, under the vast Texas sky, surrounded by the family they had built together, Nadine finally, completely, let go of the past. The ghosts would always be there, memories of what she had lost and what she had survived. But they no longer had power over her. She had reclaimed her life, her joy, her future. She was Nadine Kane, rancher's wife, mother of 3, survivor and thriver. Her scars had made her stronger, and her love for Xander and his for her had made her whole. The story of the scared girl who stumbled into Desdemona was over. The story of the woman who built a life worth living had just begun. And it promised to be a long and happy one, filled with children and grandchildren and long years of love and laughter, and growing old together on the prairie they both called home. As Xavier stirred and mumbled something in his sleep, as Nathaniel called out from his bedroom wanting a drink of water, As Nora appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes and asking why everyone was still awake, Nadine laughed. This was her life now. Beautiful, chaotic, imperfect, and absolutely worth every scar it had taken to get here. She stood and gathered Nora into her arms, breathing in the sweet smell of her daughter's hair. Xander rose with Xavier, and together they herded their children back inside, back to bed, back to the rhythms of family life. And as Nadine tucked Nora back under her blankets and kissed her forehead, as she checked on Nathaniel and refilled his water glass, as she watched Xander gently lay Xavier back in his crib, she felt a profound sense of peace. This was everything. This was enough. This was more than enough. And when she and Xander finally made their way to their own bed, when he pulled her close, and she settled against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. "Good night, my love," Xander murmured, already half asleep. "Good night," she whispered back. And for the first time in years, Nadine fell asleep without a single nightmare, dreaming instead of all the beautiful tomorrows still to come. The years continued to unfold with a gentle rhythm that Nadine had never experienced before coming to Desdemona. There was comfort in the predictability of ranch life, in knowing that each season brought its own tasks and challenges and joys. Spring meant calving and branding. Summer meant long days in the heat managing the herd. Fall meant preparing for winter. And winter meant gathering close around the fire and weathering the cold together. By 1895, Nathaniel was 15 and already as tall as his father, working full days alongside the ranch hands and showing a natural aptitude for handling both horses and cattle. Nora was 13 and had inherited her Aunt Xenia's fierce independence, insisting on learning everything her brother learned despite occasional resistance from the more traditional ranch hands. Xavier was 9 and still the wild one, fearless to the point of giving Nadine heart palpitations on a regular basis. They had added one more child to their family in 1891, a daughter named Noel who was now 4 years old and the absolute darling of everyone on the ranch. She had Xander's blue eyes and Nadine's gentle temperament, and she followed her father everywhere, convinced that he hung the moon. Life was good. The ranch was prosperous, the children were healthy, and Nadine's relationship with Xander had only deepened with time. They had weathered droughts and hard winters, sick cattle and difficult births, the death of Martha 2 years ago and Samuel's brief serious illness. Through it all, they had held together, supporting each other just as Xander had promised they would all those years ago. One afternoon in late October, Nadine was in the kitchen preparing supper when Nathaniel came in from the range, dusty and tired. He poured himself a glass of water and leaned against the counter, watching his mother work. "Mama, can I ask you something?" he said. "Of course, honey. What is it?" "How did you know Papa was the right one? The one you wanted to marry?" Nadine paused in her chopping and looked up at her eldest son, seeing the seriousness in his young face. "Why are you asking? Is there a girl you are thinking about?" His ears went red. "Maybe. Sarah Mitchell from the neighboring ranch. She is smart and pretty, and she does not mind that I smell like cattle most of the time." Nadine smiled. Sarah was a lovely girl, the daughter of their closest neighbors, and Nadine had noticed the way Nathaniel's eyes followed her at church socials. "I think Sarah is wonderful, but you want to know how I knew about your father?" "Yes. You came from somewhere else, right? Before Desdemona, something bad happened, but Papa never told us the details. He said it was your story to tell if you wanted to." Nadine set down her knife and moved to sit at the kitchen table, gesturing for Nathaniel to join her. He was old enough now to hear at least part of the truth, old enough to understand that life was not always easy. Something very bad did happen, she said carefully. When I was 22, raiders attacked our homestead. They killed my parents and burned everything. I survived, but I was hurt and I carried a lot of guilt and fear. When I came to Desdemona, I was not looking for love. I was just looking for a place to hide. Nathaniel's eyes were wide. But you found Papa. I did, and at first I was terrified of him. Not because he was frightening, but because he was kind, and kindness made me feel vulnerable. But he was patient with me. He never pushed me to talk about things before I was ready. He showed me through his actions, day after day, that I could trust him. And gradually, I realized that I did not just trust him, I loved him. I knew he was the right one because he made me want to be brave again. He made me want to live, really live, instead of just surviving. That is romantic, Nathaniel said, a slight smile tugging at his mouth. It is, but it is also real. Love is not just about butterflies in your stomach and sweaty palms when a pretty girl smiles at you, although those things are nice. Real love is about choosing someone every single day, about being willing to work through the hard times together, about trusting someone with your whole heart even when that is terrifying. Did you have scars? Papa mentioned once that you had been hurt. Nadine hesitated, then slowly rolled up her sleeve to reveal the faded white lines that still crisscrossed her forearm. I have scars inside and out. For a long time, I thought they made me unworthy of love, that no one would want someone as damaged as I was. But your father taught me that scars are just proof that you survived something difficult. They do not make you less. If anything, they make you stronger. Nathaniel reached out and gently touched one of the scars, his expression thoughtful. Papa was right. You are the strongest person I know, Mama. You run this household and help with the ranch and raise all of us, and you always make it look easy even though I know it is not. Tears pricked at Nadine's eyes. Thank you, sweetheart. That means more to me than you know. So if I want to court Sarah, you think I should just be honest with her? Tell her how I feel and hope she feels the same way. I think that is a fine place to start, and I think you are wise to think carefully about these things. You are young yet, Nathaniel. There is no rush. But if Sarah makes you want to be a better man, if she makes you excited about the future, then yes, she might be the right one for you. He nodded slowly, clearly thinking it over. Then he surprised her by leaning over and kissing her cheek. Thanks, Mama. I am glad you found Papa. I am glad you did not give up, even when things were hard. Me too, honey. Me too. That evening, after the children were in bed, Nadine told Xander about the conversation with Nathaniel. They were sitting on the porch as they often did, watching the stars come out one by one. Our son is growing up, Xander said with a mix of pride and melancholy. Soon he will be courting seriously, then getting married, then giving us grandchildren. Where does the time go? I was thinking the same thing, but I am proud of the man he is becoming. We did a good job with him, Xander. We did a good job with all of them. Even Xavier, despite his best efforts to send us to early graves with his antics. Nadine laughed. He reminds me of you, actually. From the stories Xenia tells, you were quite the wild child yourself. I prefer to think of it as adventurous, Xander said with mock dignity. Then his expression grew more serious. You showed him your scars, he asked. And he is old enough to know that life has hard parts, that people carry pain and still manage to build beautiful lives. You are an amazing mother, Nadine, and an amazing woman. I hope you know that. I know it because you tell me regularly, she said, reaching for his hand. I know it because you have spent 17 years showing me I am worthy of love and respect and happiness. I know it because every time I doubt myself, you are there to remind me of how far I have come. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. We have come far together, and we still have so much ahead of us. watching our children grow and marry and have children of their own. Growing old together on this land we love, I cannot wait to see what the future holds for us." "Neither can I," Nadine said, and she meant it. The girl who had been afraid to hope for a future beyond the next day was long gone. In her place was a woman who looked forward with excitement and joy, who trusted that whatever came, she and Xander would face it together. As if summoned by their conversation about the future, that future began to unfold with beautiful inevitability. Nathaniel did court Sarah Mitchell, with all the seriousness and sweetness of first love. 2 years later, when he was 17 and she was 16, he asked Xander and Nadine if he could marry her when they were both a bit older. "You have my blessing," Xander said, "but you should wait until you are at least 20 and she is 18. That will give you time to make sure this is what you both really want, and it will give you time to build a small house on the property so you will have a place to start your married life." Nathaniel agreed, and he and Sarah spent the next few years in a courtship that was both old-fashioned and thoroughly sweet. Nadine liked Sarah more and more as she got to know her, appreciated her level head and kind heart, and the way she made Nathaniel laugh. In 1900, Nathaniel and Sarah were married in the same church where Nadine and Xander had exchanged vows 18 years earlier. Nadine cried through the entire ceremony, overcome by the realization that her baby boy was now a man starting his own family. Xander held her hand and cried right along with her, neither of them ashamed of their tears. Nora, now 18 herself, had fallen in love with a young lawyer who had opened a practice in Desdemona. She married him in 1902, and though she moved to town rather than staying on the ranch, she visited often with her new husband, who quickly became part of the extended family. Xavier, true to his wild nature, took longer to settle down. He spent his late teens and early 20s working on various ranches throughout Texas and the New Mexico territory, learning different methods and making a name for himself as one of the best horse handlers in the region. But eventually, at 24, he returned to the Double K with a wife in tow, a spirited woman named Rosa who could ride as well as any man, and who gave as good as she got in any argument with Xavier. Noel, the baby of the family, grew into a lovely young woman who wanted nothing more than to teach school. She attended a teacher's college in Austin and returned to Desdemona to teach at the small schoolhouse, boarding with Nora and her husband in town. And through it all, through weddings and births and the inevitable losses that came with time, Nadine and Xander remained the steady center of their growing family. They were both in their mid-40s now, with gray beginning to thread through their hair and lines on their faces that came from years of laughter and sun and hard work. But they were still as in love as they had been on their wedding day, still reached for each other in the night, still found joy in the simple act of being together. In 1905, Nathaniel and Sarah made Nadine and Xander grandparents for the first time with the birth of a daughter they named Hope. Nadine held her first grandchild and wept, overcome by the realization that this was what she had been building toward all these years. This continuation of life, this proof that love and family could triumph over tragedy and loss. "Your mother would have loved this," Xander said softly as they sat together that evening, passing baby Hope back and forth between them. "Seeing you as a grandmother, seeing all our children grown and happy, she would be so proud of you." "I hope so," Nadine said. "I like to think she and Papa are watching somehow, seeing that I survived and thrived, that I took the worst moment of my life and built something beautiful from it. They see," Xander said with certainty, "and they are proud. How could they not be?" More grandchildren followed in the years that came. Nora had twin boys in 1906. Xavier and Rosa had a son in 1907 and a daughter in 1909. Even Noel eventually married one of the other teachers and had a child of her own. The ranch house that had once seemed so spacious was constantly full of noise and laughter, grandchildren running through the rooms that Nadine and Xander had filled with love decades ago. In 1910, Nadine was 54 years old and Xander was 55. They had been married for 28 years, and the life they had built together exceeded anything Nadine had dreamed possible during those dark days after the raid. She no longer had nightmares. The scars on her arms had faded to nearly invisible white lines. And while she still thought of her parents often, the pain of losing them had transformed into a bittersweet ache rather than the sharp agony it once was. One evening in late spring, Nadine and Xander sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. But this time, they were not alone. Around them were their 4 grown children and their spouses, their 8 grandchildren ranging in age from infant to 5 years old, Samuel and his wife and their grown children. The porch and yard were full of family, full of the sound of talking and laughing and children playing. "Look what we built," Xander said softly, his arm around Nadine's shoulders. "Look at all of this." "It is everything," Nadine replied. "Everything I never thought I would have. Everything I did not think I deserved." "You deserve this and more," he said. "You are the heart of this family, Nadine. None of this would exist without you, without your courage to keep living when it would have been easier to give up, without your willingness to trust me, to love me, to build this life with me." She looked up at him, at this man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved. "We built it together. That is what you told me all those years ago, and it is still true. We saved each other. We gave each other a reason to hope and dream and believe in the future. I love you," he said, "as much now as I did the day I married you. More even, because now I know every part of you and I love every single part." "I love you too," she said. "Thank you for seeing past my scars. Thank you for teaching me that they made me stronger, not weaker. Thank you for giving me this life." He kissed her there on the porch, in front of their whole family, and their grandchildren giggled, and their children smiled, and Nadine felt a profound sense of completion. This was the ending her story deserved. Not tragedy and loss, but love and family and a future that stretched out bright and beautiful before them. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet again, Nadine stood in front of the mirror in their bedroom. Xander came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. Together, they looked at their reflection, middle-aged and weathered by years of hard work and hot sun, but still recognizable as the young people who had fallen in love in Desdemona so many years ago. Nadine slowly rolled up her sleeve, exposing the old scars on her arm. Xander's hand covered hers, his fingers tracing the faded lines with the same reverence he had shown the first time he touched them. "These make you stronger," he said again, repeating the words that had changed her life. "They always have. They always will." "I know," she said. "I finally really know." She turned in his arms and kissed him, pouring into that kiss everything she felt, all the love and gratitude and joy that filled her to overflowing. And when they finally pulled apart, she knew with absolute certainty that she had found her happy ending. Not the fairy tale kind where nothing bad ever happened, but the real kind where 2 broken people found each other and built something whole and beautiful together. The story that had begun with blood and screams and loss had ended with love and laughter, and a family that spanned generations. And standing there in Xander's arms, with the Texas moon shining through their window and the sounds of the prairie drifting in on the night breeze, Nadine Winters Kane knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. She had survived. She had healed. She had loved and been loved in return. And her scars, those marks of pain and survival, had indeed made her stronger. Strong enough to build a life worth living. Strong enough to love without reservation. Strong enough to finally, completely, absolutely believe that she deserved every bit of happiness she had found. This was her story. And it had a perfect ending after all.